If you are judging yourself while you're writing, you're doing it wrong because you are not your thoughts. You are the person who acts on thoughts. That's character. The reason we feel so disconnected from ourselves, from our own values and beliefs, what we like and what we don't like, is because we are documenting our lives for the sake of others. It's not entirely our fault. We've got very addictive slot machine level social media platforms, but it is our responsibility to create that space for ourselves. Are you creating space for yourself to really hear your own inner voice? Hearing your own inner voice brings so much clarity into your life. Hearing yourself think, seeing the ink to paper solidifies it in a way that actually gives you a sense of confidence. If you are constantly the person distracting yourself with the never-ending podcasts, series, doom scrolling, that gap between who you want to be and who you show up in your day-to-day is quite a big gap. I've been there. But the number one thing I think that you could do as a start would be to journal. I have been journaling for 10 years now. And what I did to prep for this video is I went through the last 5 years of journaling, paged through all my entries and put together what is the mindset that I have towards journaling, why it works for me so well. There's so much to get excited about around, I guess, the beauty of it. But it's so much more than, the Pinterest board ritual. It really is a mindset, and it's something that you can do for the rest of your life and have this beautiful collection to look back on. By the end of this video, I want you to, of course, feel inspired. But more so, I want you to find your why. Because when you understand your why to why you're journaling, it will be a lot easier to make it a consistent habit. And at the end of this video, I'll also take you through my journaling ecosystem, so how I rotate between my journals. What I think is important to talk about is also, why do we get stuck with journaling? Why does it not turn into a keystone habit in our lives? And the first is definitely not knowing what you're doing it for. It is so easy to be sold the aesthetic of journaling. But if you do not know what you're doing it for, if you do not know your why, you will get stuck. The second thing is making it a pressure habit. This is not a place to show up perfect. This is not something that you have to do consistently every single day. This is not something that requires you to have perfect handwriting. I really don't have perfect handwriting. I don't believe that this should be something that demands a layer of yourself where you're filtering. You should make this a space for yourself where there is no judgment welcome here. This is a no judgment zone because you are not your thoughts. If it feels like it's performance, you're doing it wrong. Thirdly, the blank page. When you start journaling and you open that blank page, it can feel almost like stupid. It can feel embarrassing, but that often means that's probably the person who needs to lean into this the most. If you know anything about shadow work, that's like shouting from your shadow that this is embarrassing, this is dumb, and like, what am I even going to write about? I get it. Realize that then you've internalized something about writing down your feelings. You've internalized something that's triggering something and going, oh, cringe. And that's a good thing. You need to lean into that. That's a sign that you should definitely journal. Okay, the last point when it comes to barriers, which I'm probably most passionate about, is I'm not going to journal because it feels so self-absorbed. It feels self-indulgent. And that is simply the biggest false truth. I've started to see why it's actually the most selfless thing that you can do. So, why should you journal? For me, journaling comes down to 3 main things, and I have given a word to each category. The first is to uncover. The second is to reclaim. Love that word. And the last is to return. Let's get started with pillar 1, which is to uncover. The uncover pillar in my life is uncovering the subconscious, uncovering your inner world. Do you know what's sad is the more I've worked in corporate, obviously the more I use a computer, and the more I found myself frustrated to write because it is a slower process. It is so easy now to turn on dictation on your phone and record a thought. It's also quite easy to text if you're putting into your notes app. And honestly, I do all of those things. But there's a difference for me when it comes to writing and actually writing in a journal, because you're slowing that whole process down. You know that like meme or that joke of scrolling through my notes app from a 2 a.m. random Tuesday, and it's like horrific. That's what the notes app is for. But when it comes to journaling, like a lot of us don't write by hand as much anymore because of how slow it is. But that is to your advantage. You're rethinking the word that you're about to write down next, and maybe you pick a different word. So it's a much slower process of thought. Interesting fact is they did a study on students who wrote down notes for a lecture versus students who typed. And the students who wrote notes down, often when you're note taking, you don't have the time to write down every single last sentence, every single last word. So you almost kind of have to summarize it and maybe make a little diagram, write a little doodle to remind yourself, so it becomes more conceptual. And so those students that wrote instead of typed their notes actually were much better at the more deep conceptual level questions. You are twice as more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. So when you write down manifestations, intentions, you are so much more likely to act on what you say you're going to do. In meditation, something that I've learned is the way that you slowly become more and more enlightened is by becoming the watcher of your thoughts. Because the moment you create that space between you and your thoughts, you realize you're not your thoughts. And we all have some crazy thoughts sometimes. Another way I use journaling to uncover was actually when I started going to therapy. When I started earning my own salary, I decided the first thing I definitely wanted to do was get into therapy. But I also knew there was going to be a limit to how many sessions I could afford. And so to maximize this commitment and investment in my life, I journaled before each session, but then more importantly, straight after the session, I would go into often like an hour, even sometimes like a 2-hour journaling session to process everything. The value that has given me, because I can go back to a therapy session I had 2 years ago and remember the things I learned, is insane. So in that way, journaling has helped me really integrate what I learned when similar scenarios would happen in my life. Reading back through things that I had unlocked in that session and forgotten, so helpful. This one is a big one, is emotional spirals. Why journal when you can vent to a friend? Why journal when you can call up your sibling and chat for 3 hours? Honestly, you need all of those things, but we have all caught ourselves in emotional spirals. This often comes through with venting and complaining. They feel so productive, don't they? They feel like you're solving something and you're doing it with another person, so you're feeling seen and you're feeling validated. But how often do we get stuck in those cycles of venting where it's not actually solving anything and it's turning into rumination? I can feel it in my soul when I haven't been journaling. There have been times in my life where I've completely forgotten about it. And these are the moments where I'm venting more than ever. I'm stuck in the same complaining loops. I am uncomfortable when I'm alone with my own thoughts, so I distract myself. There's a time and a place to connect with others and to ask for help and to open up to others. But there's a difference between that, and you know what I'm talking about, the difference between that and actually it turning into rumination and you starting to sound like a stuck record. This is a beautiful thing about journaling. You put this rumination and this overthinking onto paper, and you might even giggle. You might even laugh. You might realize how silly it is. You will catch yourself realizing this big, scary, intimidating thing in your head is not as big as you realized it was. That is what sparks change. When you turn back 10 entries and you realize you were complaining about the exact same thing, that is the kind of stuff that will create the feeling in your stomach that you'll want to change, that you'll want to actually show up with a different behavior, a different approach. You know what's also funny is, have you ever wanted to give someone advice? This someone is someone who complains to you a lot, and they complain about the same things often. You can kind of tell the advice is kind of bouncing off of them. It's not going in. That's because we need to be able to also solve our own problems. The beauty of my journaling practice is I feel empowered. I feel I have agency to solve my own problems. Honestly, getting older every year just makes life so much better. Something changed when I turned 25, where I started to feel a little bit more stubborn with the things that I like and with the things that I don't like. I think journaling has a lot to do with this, is when you understand yourself, you're better at creating boundaries. The kind of boundaries where you don't have to say them out loud to anyone. You just know them in yourself and you act on them. But don't ever think that this is self-indulgent. It is the kindest thing that you can do. A lot of the hurt that some of us have experienced in life, and a lot of the hurt that we've done to others, we're not proud of, because it's like, where did that come from? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? It's an unconscious vomit onto another person. This is a wonderful way to get in touch with yourself, to understand yourself better. We've talked now a lot about uncovering, which is often, it's the harder work, it's the shadow work, it's the emotional work. But I want to talk about the next pillar. This is to reclaim. I mentioned I love this word because to reclaim something means it insinuates that it was already there. It's lost somewhere and you just need to reclaim it. What I love about that is most of us know what we need. We know the things that we need to do to change our lives. There's so much that we pretend to not know. We seek advice from others, but we don't really want to take it because you need to give it to yourself. If you're writing about a lot of emotional turmoil, ask yourself after an entry like that, is it true? They say that wave of emotion in your brain actually only lasts 90 seconds. If it lasts longer than that, it's because of the story that we tell ourselves, and it's usually a subconscious one. Sometimes we don't get the apology. And sometimes the best thing that we can do is reframe, use it as part of the fuel to your story. We have triggers in our lives, and that trigger creates a feeling. But the problem is we start attaching a story to this feeling subconsciously. Now that story gives us meaning. Even if it's a negative story, it starts attaching itself to who we think we are, to our identity. And what journaling can do is it can intercept that. If you have a trigger, and instead of that trigger and that feeling turning into a story, you intercept it, you process it, and you reframe it, you're back in control of that story. And so reclaiming, what I love about that word is it kind of reminds me of, we all have this child self, and a lot of the work that we do is almost returning to this child self. There's a self in you that embodies freedom, and she is so free-spirited, she's so full of joy. Through life, we adapt, right? And that's okay. We adapt for different circumstances. We all go through our awkward teens. There are crazy maladaptions that happen in that phase of life. But eventually, we need to reclaim our stories. So a lot of my practice sits in this pillar. This is where I take accountability. This is where I manifest. I goal set. I reframe. I take the negative or the thing that happened that didn't go my way, and I turn it into it's happening for me. Life is never happening to you, it's happening for you. And it's so hard to believe that when it's happening. Like, it is so hard, and that's why you have this companion. But if you only kind of stay in that victim mindset, you'll not unlock this pillar. And this pillar of agency is so important. It's going to propel you forward. Something that's so lovely to do with journaling is tapping into your higher self. Sometimes I journal in a way that's almost asking for advice from my future self. At the end of the day, we have animal brains where negativity sticks out like a sore thumb on the timeline of our lives. So looking back, memory can actually be quite unkind to us, in that the negative is so easy to remember. When you do the beautiful act of reclaiming your story, life is pretty much just perception. Isn't it crazy that two people can go through the exact same event and you talk to them 10 years later and they remember it completely differently? But reframing and then choosing to act in a way that's aligned with your true self, you'll build resilience. You'll look back and see, I got through that. I went through something so similar there. I'm going to do it again today. I had to stop myself from crying while going through some of these old entries. The level of compassion it has unlocked for my younger self in reading what she was going through when she was 21, it makes you proud to have had the history that you had, because you are telling the story. When you journal, something that you'll start to notice along the way is your process. There's a beautiful way of saying it. Alan Watts said this, and he said, you are an apple on a tree and a character in a play. And what he means by that is, to feel content with who you are, you have to be both. You have to be the character in the play, which is the persona, the identity, the character that you've built. And there's value to that. It's not to say that it's fake. It's how we are social beings, right? But at the same time, you're an apple on a tree. And what he means by that is you are a process. So the same way an apple grows off of a tree, it's part of this ecosystem. There's certain things out of your control because you're part of this unfolding ecosystem of life. And if you hold both of those things, that there's so much you can't control in this ecosystem because you're just the apple on the tree and you're part of something so much greater than yourself. But at the same time, it still matters to show up as who is that character in this play that we call life. I think there's two levels to it, right? So if you lean too far into the character in the play, you maybe become self-absorbed, or you maybe lose touch with reality, or you take everything personally. You're stuck in this identity of self. And in the same way, if you swing too far in the other direction, you're no longer the author of your own life. You're no longer the author of your own story. You don't feel in control. You're the victim. You are watching life happen, whereas here you're writing the story. And so it's really important to hold those two opposing thoughts in one space. When I journal, I get to be both the observer and the participant. You uncover and you observe and you unlock, and then you shift into the participant role by choosing agency, by making your dreams a reality, by holding yourself accountable. So we have arrived at our final pillar, which is to return. This last pillar is beautiful because it's simply a byproduct of the first two. And that byproduct is you can return to this beautiful, rich, textured memory timeline. I don't know if you can relate to this, but often if I'm going through social media and let's say I'm going through my old university memories, Nostalgia can be cheeky in that it makes you feel so good, but of course it's going to look so good because you only captured the best moments on social media. Scrolling through my past journaling entries, however, are so much richer. There's all the different emotions and everything in between. Often it feels like my past self is giving me advice that is actually quite applicable to what's going on in my life right now. It feels a bit like time travel. It's like this portal. You go into a mundane Tuesday night when you were 18 years old and you so easily forgot what that was like, but now you've got a straight line portal into that world. And so in this way, returning to these memories can almost feel like, it can feel like magic. It adds this romantic layer to your life where certain things have been frozen in time and they've been good memories and they've been hard times, but you've gotten through them and now you're looking back and making sense of it all. I think I will take you through my current journaling ecosystem. It is not this many journals, don't worry. Some of these are older ones. Have you ever had multiple notebooks and you just can't fill them? The habit isn't there to go from the start page to the end page. Well, this is why I have 3 journals, because I get to swap between all 3 of them whenever I feel like it, and they all have slightly different roles. So I think I'll start with this middle-sized one. This is for anything travel related, so holidays, trips, even when it comes to like a celebration I want to remember, it's more like a memory journal. And I realized there were so many good memories that I wasn't capturing, so that's what this one is for. This is the usual. This is like, where's the other one? I usually go for this size for my day-to-day journals. They're about A5. If I learn something in a podcast, it goes in here. If I want to summarize a book, which has helped me retain the things I learn in books so much more, it goes in here. If something goes south in my life and I want to just let out a stream of consciousness, it also goes in here. Something cute I also do is I always put a little envelope in the front of my book, and inside it are like little poems and letters that people have gifted me. And then my newest edition, which is so cute, look at her. She was gifted to me and I didn't actually know what to do with this book. As of recently, I've been trying to get more into manifestation. I'm trying to talk about my future self and how I want to show up. So that is my 3-step system. I definitely use this one the most. I'm almost finished her. I will need to replace that one soon. And something that I love is that these books don't they feel like holy? There is something to a journal that feels sacred. That's the word I want to use. These books feel sacred. It feels like an act of self-love every time I use them. They literally have gold pages. Are you kidding me? I hope that your journaling practice brings you so much joy as it has brought me. I hope that you use the motivation from this video and you go find the nearest journal that you can find. Start even with 3 sentences today. And I'm so excited to share more about this. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you have any more questions, I would love to hear them. But for now, start with the why. Bye!